Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I will call this meeting to order. In the spirit of truth and reconciliation, we acknowledge the town of Edson is located on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral lands of the Niqawak, Saulteaux, Siksika, Piikani, Kainai, Dene, Nakota Sioux, and the Apitawak nations. We honor the knowledge of this land, the elders and youth which gather here, and our ancestors who gathered here for centuries. With that, before we move to the adoption of the agenda, I'd like to hand things over to CEO Beveridge to introduce a new member of the Town of Edson team.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce Amanda Veerboom. She comes to us with health industry experience as well as municipal experience. We are pleased to have her join us as a legislative and corporate initiatives coordinator. We will be, we'll see her occasionally in person, but often we will see her on the screen. So there'll be times where she'll be the voice in the sky. So anyway, welcome, Amanda.
Welcome, Amanda. Thank you very much. Can I get a motion, please, that the agenda for the September 19th, 2023 regular meeting of council be adopted as presented? And we will go to Councillor Chouinard.
Motion to adopt the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Chouinard. And with that, we will call the question. Please vote now. And that motion is carried unanimously. Can I get a motion, please, that the minutes of the September 5th, 2023 regular meeting of council be adopted as amended? Please. Councillor Beyer, and you want to make that motion?
I so move.
Thank you, Councillor Beyer, and we will hand things over to our legislative coordinator.
Sorry, through the mayor to council, there was an error in the September 5th minutes. The RCMP multi-year financial plan was removed from closed and added to open on the agenda, but was inadvertently included in the minutes as a closed item.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, we will call the question. Please vote now. And that motion is carried unanimously. We have no public hearings, no delegations, no reading of bylaws. Can I get a motion, please, that council approve the 2023-2024 application for the Alberta Community Partnership ACP Municipal Internship Program for a municipal intern for the administrator stream? And we will hand things over to Councillor Pasichny.
I so move.
Thank you. And we'll hand things over to Mr. Paul Hanlon.
My apology, I am currently speaking. There we go. This is, as I mentioned, a program that the town of Edson is familiar with. As a reminder, host municipalities receive a grant from the province of $60,000 in funding towards salary, benefits, and other related expenses. The town's portion of that is $46,000 over an 18-month period. Administration is looking to secure an intern in the administrator stream, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that council may have on this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Hanlon. We'll open the floor to questions. Council, do you have any questions, comments, or concerns for Mr. Hanlon? Go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, through the mayor to Mr. Hanlon. I wasn't on council the last time we had sort of started that process, the internship. Do you take from a pool, or do you still select or interview the intern and go through that process, or is an intern selected to you?
Go ahead, Mr. Hanlon.
Thank you, sir. Excuse me, through you to Councillor Taylor. The process is First, municipalities apply to the province, and typically 12 to 16 municipalities receive these grants, and they identify which stream they are interested in. Then Municipal Affairs goes out, they try to recruit potential interns. Interns identify the communities they're interested in interviewing with, and then ultimately the town of Edson will determine which of these candidates they'd like to interview and possibly extend an offer to.
Thank you, Mr. Hamlin. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Through to Mr. Hamlin, I know that when we discussed this program previously, we've had much success with this program, but there was certainly concerns about capacity of overseeing the program. Is that concern now alleviated with us applying for this program?
Sir, through you to council, I believe in the administrator stream it is. We had some concerns of maybe not having the adequate mentorship in place for the planning stream at this time, but we believe that we can certainly keep a qualified candidate busy for 18 months in the administrator stream.
All right, thank you. And CO Beveridge, you want to supplement?
Mr. Mayor, I think I would like to supplement. I think when we looked at where we were going to place this municipal intern in the reporting relationship, typically it would be to the CAO. But at this time, we determined, just based on the experience around the table, that Mr. Hanlon would be the best suited as far as providing the mentorship. There's a little bit required from the municipality, of course, to provide that mentorship and guidance, as well as attend meetings with the province and the intern. So at this time, we felt that this was a pretty good opportunity for us to potentially attract a younger professional to our organization once again. I think at the time when we did remove this from the budget, we were in a different state. And it was with reluctance that we ended the program early last time. But we feel that, I think that a little more bench strength from the university aspect of going through that program and working with the municipal internship program, we feel this would be very valuable at this time.
All right, thank you, CO Beveridge. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, I will call the question. Please vote now. And that motion is carried unanimously. Can I get a motion that council authorize administration to apply for the 2023 Forest Resource Improvement Association of Alberta FRIA Fire Smart Vegetation Management Grant? Go ahead, Councillor Bevan.
I'll make it so.
Thank you, Councillor Bevan. And we have Fire Chief Milton with us, and we'll hand things over to him if you just want to turn on your microphone. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through to Council. This grant is something that the Town of Edson and the Edson Fire Department have applied for many, many years. This particular area that we're going to be focusing on has been completed for fire smart activities, but after about a decade now, there is overgrowth and there is hangers or danger trees that need to be addressed. So we are going through for an expression of interest to FRIA for the re-treatment of that area with a continued plan for the next 5 to 7 years to continue the rest of our forested areas.
All right, thank you, Chief. Questions, Council? Go ahead, Councillor Beyer.
Thanks. Through the chair to our Fire Chief Milton. I'm very pleased to see that this has come forward. I'm sure everybody is. My question is regarding Wilmore Park. I don't know if that was actually fire smarted in the past. I know it was logged. Is that going to be included in this application?
It is something we can, through the chair to Councillor Beyer, it is something that we can certainly look at in the future. With the fact of it being a lease for us, I'm not sure with something we'd have to explore for the regulations on that, but it's definitely something we could explore for sure.
All right, thank you. Councillor Chenard.
Okay, through the chair to the fire chief. I think in the previous years, about 50 or 60,000. Do we have any indication of how much money we're going to get, or they dictate
Through the chair to Councillor Chouinard. The previous years, I believe the forested area was calculated at 5.6 hectares to be done, and that was the last time it was done was around 100,000. What that dealt with is removing the trees and having the canopy thinning. Our last quote that I just received was approximately about a $50,000 mark for retreatment, and there is a buffer put into that as well for about a 10% buffer. So,
Okay, thank you.
no worries.
Thank you, Councillor Chenard and Chief Milton. Council, any further questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, I will call the question. Please vote now. And that motion is carried unanimously. Can I get a motion, please, that council accept the update on the Pivotal Energy Partners Development Project as information? Go ahead, Councillor Chenard.
I'll move that we accept for information.
Thank you, Councillor Chenard, and we will hand things over to Mr. Kitlitz, who will do a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to work on getting my attachments up here. One moment, bear with me. Okay. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, members of council. So this is just a brief update on the Pivotal Energy Partners project that's been ongoing in the town since the beginning of this year. The town received an application to redistrict 46.3 hectares of land legally described as the Southwest 155317 West of the 5th, which is just south of the CN rail yard identified in the area here. That was to redistrict the land from urban reserve to an M2 heavy industrial districting, and the purpose for that application was to prepare the lands for a C3 plus processing facility for natural gas liquids. On April 4th of 2023, council did support that redistricting of that land, and Pivotal proceeded to make their application to the Alberta Energy Regulator to get approval for this facility. That process requires a rather large community engagement and consultation component, and there's a requirement for properties within 500 meters of the facility to support the application moving forward. Pivotal spent quite a bit of time working with those landowners, communicating, negotiating, understanding concerns, and although there was probably a lot that we weren't privy to, certainly we were made aware of the concerns with respect to the safety of the site operationally, and then also access to the site, emergency access and egress to the area, which does not exist today. So Pivotal was able to work with the landowners to get an application that was submitted that was non-contested. I know that's not the right terminology, but I can't remember what it is right now. And they did receive a license from the AER on May 16th of 2023. So shortly after that, Pivotal applied to the town for a development permit to do the stripping and grading of the site. This was to allow them to begin work on getting the site prepared in advance of applying for the actual facility. So we went through that, and that application was issued with conditions, and one being that they had to provide that temporary emergency access and egress as a condition of that approval. And that condition was dated to be done by September 30th of this year. They are actively working on that. Obviously, actually what I'll do is I'll move to the next slide here, just bear with me. How do I make that bigger? Sorry that that's not very big. Let's see if I can make it a bit bigger. So just for some context, so Pivotal's initial plan was to negotiate access through the CN rail yard to the I guess north of the property, which is identified by the green dash line. A lot of time was spent trying to negotiate that, secure that access and egress point. Unfortunately, they weren't able to get that in writing. So CN, and understandably, it's an operational yard. They were unwilling to give a carte blanche written statement saying it would always be available 24/7 for emergency access and egress. They certainly agreed verbally to provide it whenever they could, and they also provided operational processes in place to split trains and do whatever they could to open up the rail, the 54th Street if needed. But sadly, that didn't meet the conditions of the development permit. We needed to have something in writing, something secured to make sure that access was available 24/7. Plan B for Pivotal, or one of the options, and there's many, but one they wanted to look at was potentially using we have a right-of-way here that has a sanitary line in it, creating a temporary road there to get folks out to Golf Course Road to the east. I think that's their current one that they're looking at. Quite costly, and it's in a temporary nature. But at any rate, they have a condition to meet to get a temporary access and egress supplied. They subsequently made their application to apply for the actual development of the facility. The RFD mentions June 29th they applied. It was actually a typo. It's July 29th they made application for that permit. So that permit was again applied for the actual development of the facility. As part of that process, we referred the application to external agencies and Yellowhead County. We did get some questions and concerns back with respect to buffering between this facility and residential properties to the south, and also with respect to emergency response and fire suppression. We were able to work on getting them information they needed. Pivotal did submit a emergency response plan, and we also, actually that previous graphic I showed, I can go back to it. This area here, and sorry I can't tell you what color that is represents sort of the buffer area between the facility and adjacent properties, and there's a condition of that permit is there's a minimum 400 meter buffer between the site, operational site, and the residential property to the south. So those were shared with the referrals, and response back was thanking us for the information, so we're taking that as agreement to move forward. So that development permit was issued on September 11th, 2023, and that prepares Pivotal to now apply for their building permits so they can get those in place to start construction of the facility, which they hope to have operational in April of 2024. So one of the things that was supplied as part of the permit was a traffic impact assessment to determine the impact of the extra truck traffic in this area. If you note number 1 here on this graphic is the intersection of 54th Street and 2nd Avenue. The traffic impact assessment that was submitted by Pivotal suggested that the proposed development doesn't actually trigger or any improvements to that intersection at all. But in fact, the improvements are already needed, meaning that essentially what it came down to is that the town was responsible to do these intersection improvements. I found out about this when I was invited to a meeting with Pivotal and Alberta Transportation and Economic Corridors, and the fingers kind of were pointing at the town as a responsible agent to do this improvement. So it was a bit of a shock to me. At any rate, I politely said that we're not committing to anything right now until we do some more investigation in this. So I retained one of our pre-qualified engineering consultants to take a look at the TIA for us and give us another opinion or a look at that particular document. So they have done that. The next step is I'm arranging a meeting with Pivotal and their engineers, ours, and again, Alberta Transportation Economic Corridors, to having more discussions about this intersection and what improvements may or may not be needed, and who ultimately would be responsible for those improvements. So that's still on the table for discussion, but something that we weren't expecting, and we need to work through. So all in all, the summary is just suggesting that things are going quite well. There's two big things that are still outstanding that we need to deal with, that being the emergency access and egress and that intersection. And those are the things that are sort of on the table right now that we're working diligently to work through to continue to see this project move forward. So that's all I have at this point, Mr. Mayor.
Well, I believe there's a whole bunch of improvements needed on Highway 16 that are not our responsibility. So maybe they should get on that. Council, any questions, comments, or concerns? Councillor Chouinard.
Through the chair to Mr. Kitlitz, just curiously, one is for information and the other one is I have a question about how is the street holding up now? Because with the amount of gravel trucks that are hauling sand in, that's going to be over and above with the amount of tankers coming up. So are we getting any complaints or is the road holding up?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have a condition assessment of the road per se as of today, but what I can share with council is that one of the conditions of that stripping and grading was road maintenance. And so it's been being monitored, and whenever it's bad, we'll go out and make sure to tell them that they need to wet it or grade it or whatever. So they've been keeping up with maintenance, but I don't have an answer on the condition of the road as of today, but maintenance has been ongoing throughout the construction.
Then if I have the one question, on your map, Township Road 532, and we have like a gravel road that goes into the landfill. And I'm thinking if they need emergency access, because there was a well farther up, like a gas well, but there's also a town well. So I don't know if we can show the map.
Is it this one here, Mr. Councilor?
Right at 532, where is it now?
I think this is 532 here. I
Okay,
believe.
532 is the boundary of the landfill. So if you come in towards the landfill,
yeah.
you can see the gravel road, but we also have a well at the other end. And I'm just wondering, for temporary emergency access, would that be something the town could say, you can use the landfill road and join it? And that would take you out to the Wilmore Park Road. I just don't know how much road has to be added there.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. I think if I'm understanding you, Councillor Chouinard, what you're referring to, there's a temporary road in here to this well site. I don't know if you can look at the screen.
Yes, it's a temporary road,
But that's as far as it goes, right to here. So it doesn't go all the way through to Wilmore Park Road.
no, but I'm thinking at the other end, we have a gas well that a water well we come into, and I'm
Oh,
just
I see.
wondering, you know, it's not gonna be an all-purpose, but if Pivotal might say, hey, you know what?
I think that's up here.
No, but right here, where I'm saying here, following the tracks.
I think administration will take that under advisement.
Yeah, certainly.
Just look
That's
and
an option
see.
we can look at. Absolutely.
Okay,
It's one I
thank
haven't
you.
thought of. but
Thank you, Councillor Chouinard. Councillor Byer.
Thanks. Through the chair to administration. First a comment, then a question. It's definitely frustrating that we spend a decade trying to get lights and have to prove that that improvement is required for the safety of our residents. And now we have an improvement that's kind of slid under the table to us, it seems like. So that it's like, oh, by the way, this is also required, or was required previously, but yeah, we're not going to tell you till now. So my question is, what would trigger an improvement or what is the improvement that's required? Is it like a turning lane or something? And what would trigger that to be required when we didn't know that it was required before?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm not a traffic specialist, but the Coles notes of it is basically they do traffic movements. They analyze the intersection and traffic volumes and counts, and it spits out this formula that says these are the types of improvements that are needed. In that initial meeting I talked to you, I mentioned it was shared that it was a type 4 intersection improvement, which is, from my understanding, quite a substantial improvement. What I've learned since is what it comes down to is just radiuses on the, I guess that would be northbound 54th accessing 2nd Ave. We want both the inbound and the outbound radiuses increased to allow for the truck movements. Is what I'm understanding at this point is what the improvements are going to be, which are substantially less than a full type 4. But still, our information from our consultant is suggesting it maybe not even is required. So, but that's what they're looking for at this point.
Go ahead, CO Beveridge.
Mr. Mayor, I do believe we do have a little bit more information that is we'd like to share with council in closed session with regards to this item. Section 21, harmful to intergovernmental affairs or relations, as well as Section 24, advice from officials. Of course, if there's public questions that we can take right now, but there is some information that I think would be important for council to be aware of.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, through the mayor. And this may be discussed later. So, in terms of advocating for this? Is this something that council could do, or so we stick right now? Do we wish to stick with the conversations that Mr. Kitless is having, or is this something
We're sticking to this.
sticking to this? Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. Okay,
All right, can I get a motion to go in camera, please? Unless you have any public questions. Anybody have any other further public questions? Motion to go in camera? Go ahead, Councillor Chenard.
I'll make the motion to go in camera.
And that motion is carried unanimously. Any other further questions, comments from council? If not, I will call the question. All those in favor of accepting the update on the Pivotal Energy Partners Development Project as information, please vote now.
Steve, can you get that Jeopardy music?
And that motion is carried unanimously. Can I get a motion, please, that council authorize the raising of the survivors flag when deemed appropriate in consultation with the Edson Friendship Center to honor important dates significant to the Indigenous people in our community? Councillor Taylor,
I so move.
and I believe we have Ms. Byers with us from Community Service, or Senior Manager, if you would like to speak to this.
Thank you. I think the motion is fairly straightforward. We've been, discussing these items towards Truth and Reconciliation for quite some time now. And I also just wanted to add, this morning we were walked through the blanket ceremony with the Friendship Center with Elder Maynard and Renee Wolfing, and we had over 45 staff there today, and another 35 expected on Thursday. So, really, proud, I guess, to be moving some things along with the town of Edson. Is there any questions about what's in front of you?
Thank you, Ms. Byers. Councillor Position.
Yeah, through the mayor to Ms. Byers. It's kind of a wide open motion. Is that like during this month, the month of reconciliation, that you wanted to have deemed, or is this like any time of the year, or is there more detail to that? Because it's pretty, like, whenever they deem appropriate is kind of vague, and it doesn't really give me clarity. Well, it says here, the motion.
Go ahead, Ms. Byers.
Sure. Through the chair to Mayor Position, Councillor Positiony. If you go a little further under the public and stakeholder engagement, there is some parameters, I guess, built in there. This was Renee Wolfing who made the recommendation that we want to be cognizant of the ongoing discovery of buried children, and that there may be future discoveries that may spur us to raise the flag again. And also, in addition, if there were local survivors that may need to be honored in bereavement. So those were the parameters that she was suggesting, and that's why she was recommending some fluidity. And so for this year, we were thinking, just for this fall in particular, we would raise tomorrow and leave it up until the end of the month. And I would expect that next September, we would potentially raise it for the full month.
All right, thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Through the mayor to council and administration. I actually, sort of spinning off of what Ms. Byers has said, I appreciate the fluidity of the motion, because we, things change, and we don't know when issues might arise, or some of the things, the continual discovery of unmarked graves and these types of things have to give us that flexibility, and so that it's not coming back to council every single time we want to put up that flag. It's sort of in context, and it sort of ties in beautifully with our strategic plan. And as a side note, I'm very happy to hear things went well with our administration today, the staff, and the blanket exercise today, and later in the week. I already received one message of appreciation from a resident that of how well it went, and that we're working towards reconciliation. So thank you for your work on that.
All right, council, any other questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, I will call the question. Please vote now. And that motion is carried unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Byers. Can I get a motion, please, that council accept the transportation study report for information? Oh, sorry, CO Beveridge, we're gonna go to you first.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to mention, actually, Fort Saskatchewan just passed this motion as well, and they're raising their survivor's flag for the same period of time. So it's just another municipality that we saw that was taking the initiative to raise this particular flag. So,
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Byers.
Sorry, just one more thing I wanted to add. If we were to raise it around 9:30 or 10 o'clock tomorrow, or like pick a specific time, is there anyone that would like to join us? And then I could ask maintenance to be here for a certain time.
9:30. Anybody that wants to attend can.
I'm not sure if I can arrange it by 8 o'clock.
Right. All right,
9:30?
9:30.
Okay, thank you.
All right, can I get a motion, please, that council accept the transportation study report for information? Go ahead, Councillor Bevan.
I'll make it so.
Thank you, Councillor Bevan, and we will hand things over to our consultant, who will be presenting on this here this evening, Mr. Stephen Power from EXP. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I think Ms. Byers would like to probably introduce this item
Okay.
first.
Sounds good. Go ahead, Ms. Byers.
I was quite happy to let Mr. Power just take it away, but thank you, CO Beveridge. This is a project that we have been working on for quite some time now. As you're all aware, we did receive a grant through the federal government to go forward with this study. We are at the point where Mr. Power spent a lot of time in our communities, done a lot of research, met with a lot of our residents and organizations, and our committee is quite happy at this point with the product. But we want to, put it through the lens of council right now, just to see if you have any feedback, if there's, some tweaking that you would like done before we kind of enter it as a final document. And I guess we're just kind of really quite thrilled with some of the suggestions and whatnot in there. Just recognizing that we weren't looking for a full-blown transit solution in our community. We can't afford that. And so we were trying to find some really reasonable solutions, things that we could, possibly look at grants and such for. So I guess with that in mind, I will let Mr. Power take it away.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so when I was here in June, I was able to present some of the background information that we were working with, and we were in the midst of our engagement of that period. And since then, we've gone away and taken the information that we've received both from our engagement processes and through our background analysis to come up with some focus areas around this. So just in terms of that, we'll talk about the goal of the Edson Transportation Study, because I think it's important that we understand what the goal is and what this study is focused on. We'll then talk about those key focus areas that we identified through the background analysis and the engagement, which are specifically public transportation, network gaps for the pedestrian network, and the primary active transportation network, and talk a little bit about funding going forward. So really what we want to do with the Edson Transportation Study was to provide a robust and equitable transportation opportunities for residents of Edson. And it was really important to note that this study was focused on those who don't drive or cannot drive. Though it wasn't a street network plan, it is a plan to support those who needed other forms of transportation to get around. The main focus is on public transportation, but we have also put a fair bit of effort on active transportation. For one, you can't talk about public transit without talking about active transportation. The other side of it is, the ability to walk, cycle, wheel, get around by mobility scooters, whatever the case may be, is important for those residents who may not be able to drive. So I showed you the same slide back in June, but just shows you the process that we went through. We did a background analysis. We had that public and stakeholder engagement in June when I was here last. And we've gone through and turned that into a draft plan, which is what we're showing you today. So starting off with the public transportation, one of the three key areas that we looked at. Most of this information you saw the last time I was here, and Don Mitchell also presented much of the same information. But this is sort of the background that leads us into probably the areas that are really important when it looks at how we go forward with some form of public transportation. So looking at how ESTS currently operates, that cost per service hour is really the total cost divided by the number of hours that they're out there on the road. And that cost is $65 and change an hour. That's pretty typical. In fact, Edmonton's on-demand transit service runs at about $65 an hour. So that's pretty common, and it's about what you'd expect in most sort of small vehicle type of transit systems. Where it gets and the cost per kilometer and cost per trips are a little bit high, and that's because the ridership you get with ESTS is lower than you would have with a public transit system, and so that's not surprising. And those are important points as we come back at it. We look at the fare revenue as a percentage of cost. If you're looking at a full public transit system, you'd normally be looking for something in the order of 35-40% of your return coming from fares. And again, a specialized service like ESTS, you're not going to see that kind of number. It's interesting as well when we start looking at things like fare revenue as a percentage of revenue at 13%. That's not all that high, which again highlights some things about ESTS that sort of limit its ability to expand its service and just magically become a public transit system. I know there's been suggestions when we talk to the stakeholders and the public that why not just let everybody on it? And why not just run it as a public transportation system? Well, it's not quite that simple, and for a number of reasons. One is they just don't, the ESTS doesn't have the capability. Right now, their on-demand system is you phone the bus driver writes down where they're going to go, and they drive to it. That's not going to get you there. You're not going to be able to expand much. The other side of it with ESTS is they are very reliant on the Town of Edson grant, which is not surprising. Any transit system is. But they're also very reliant on donations, on advertising, not so much advertising, sorry, fundraising and donations, which is really important because those are unlikely to increase. Revenue from Edson is going to be very difficult. And so if they want to expand their service, and there's been pressure to look at evenings, look at weekends, look at addressing other groups in the community, they need to, that increases their costs, but they also then need to increase their revenue somehow. And if you take a look at the cost per trip and cost per kilometer, simply adding some more hours without adding a big chunk of revenue is going to be very difficult to make this a broader system. So, it makes sense that ESTS is kind of the starting point for a public transportation system in Edson, and it certainly is already serving special needs within Edson. But in order to sort of keep expanding that and get the hours up and expand that to other groups, it's going to be very difficult for them. So they need to build ridership. They need to get numbers up. They need to get the fare revenue up in order for that to happen if we want to expand it into other areas of the community. They've done a good job in partnerships, and this is an area they can continue to build on. Again, though, there's an upper limit. There's a ceiling on how much you can expect to gain from partners out there. There's only so many partners that you can tap into in a community this size. There are older residents that aren't using the service. Only about, when we take a look at the total number of individuals, only about 12% of the population that could be using the service are doing so. And that has a little bit to do with marketing. The buses are visible. People know about the service, but a lot of people don't know that they're actually eligible to use it. And there's a lot of misunderstanding about what it is, partly because of their branding. And I know Dawn brought this up when she was here in June, but a lot of people think it's only for seniors. In fact, they've expanded into other groups, other groups that need transportation. There's potential to take that even further. When you look at how public transportation might evolve, right now it's an existing service that addresses seniors and people with disabilities, and a lot of people don't know the second half of that. There's an impression in the community that it's only seniors. I know in talking to stakeholders who are very well connected in the community, many of them said, well, it should also, address people with disabilities, and they didn't realize that it already did. So one of the first steps, and again, this is to help get over the probably one of the biggest constraints that they have. It's not, they need new vehicles and that sort of thing, but one of the limitations to expanding that ridership is just being able to get people onto the bus. There's only so much what bus driver can do by answering the phone or writing down things as they're trying to drive around. So one of the things that is being looked at is a booking and bus tracking application. And just because we use the term app doesn't mean that everybody has to pull their phone out and use it. There's lots of ways that they can be automated. You can still phone up and get that information, which we're dealing with seniors. We know that would have to be part of it. So ESTS is starting to look at that, and we've given them a little bit of guidance on some of the apps that are out there being used out there today. And then when you move beyond that, so if you start to evolve the system a bit more, if you can get that ridership up on those who are eligible to use the system today, then you can start looking at new markets. And some of those new markets that have good potential. One is moving into low income, and when you do that, there's grants and that sort of thing that help. We see this in other communities already. Some communities have low income transit passes for those who have transit systems. There's other communities that have low income support to use taxis, that sort of thing. It seems that ESTS might be the vehicle in Edson to support the low income. The other area is employers. We know that there's a fairly high proportion of employment in Edson that is in the retail, hospitality, service industries, and working with employers might be another option that ESTS could look at to get ridership up, and working with employers to work on some subsidized travel for their employees and those that don't have the funds to necessarily drive a car and that sort of thing. So there's opportunities there. And then finally, where that can evolve into is once you've gotten to this point, you've now got the infrastructure in place around the apps. You've started to build your markets a bit. They may be ready to move on to an on-demand public transit system. For a city or a town the size of Edson, they don't need a great big fleet of buses. You can do it with, there's lots of towns that are doing it with vans. And that's kind of where ESTS is looking for new vehicles anyways. Okotoks, for example, south of Calgary, they use vans, and part of the reason they do that is so that the level of licensing needed for drivers is a lot simpler. And finding drivers is a big problem. Cochrane, for example, their on-demand system is struggling with finding drivers. So there's all kinds of different ways you can do it, and there's lots of flexibility. And an on-demand service is effectively what ESTS is now. When you start adding the technology behind it, it becomes almost like an Uber pool that you have in a large city, but operating as a public service. The next area of focus we looked at was the pedestrian and network gaps. And I'll start off by saying that when we look at the active transportation and the pedestrian gaps, this is intended as a guide, not as an absolute plan to go and implement tomorrow. In fact, pretty much everything in this report is not so much about here's the plan that you should go implement, but rather it's support that you can have to go get funding in the future to advance some of these projects. And it's a bit of a guide that should you be ready to move on to some of these things, it gives a little bit of priority. So one of the things we did was look at some of the gaps in the network, and we wanted to really put a focus around the schools. So what we did was we mapped out a 10-minute walk, what we call a walk shed. But what is within a 10-minute walk of any school? And one of the good things is, the places where you have no sidewalks at all are almost entirely outside these walk sheds, which is good. So you've already got a start. Lots of places you only have sidewalk on one side, but there's lots of places where there's little gaps in the network. And places where there's pedestrian crossings that would be helpful, places where curb extensions might be helpful, places where sidewalks just end. And so we've identified a number of those that are all relatively low-cost types of improvements. Some of them are a little bit more than just low cost, but they're the kinds of things. And we've done some prioritization on them as well. So the blues are the high priority locations, the green are the medium, and then the brown are the lower priority. And again, keeping that focus on getting kids to school safely was our first priority in that in some of that prioritization. The other thing we looked at was things like the Trails Master Plan that you already have. There were things that already overlapped. We helped prioritize them that way. And again, a lot of these improvements are just things like pedestrian crossings, some paint, some signage, and you're off to the races. Some of them are a little more substantial, there are some pathway and some sidewalk improvements, and those costs aren't insignificant. But again, we were trying to stay away from major infrastructure projects here. And again, really kind of a guide, as you move forward and you look at where you may be getting complaints and where you may be able to focus some energy on improving the pedestrian network, particularly around the school access. And the school access, fortunately, also gives you access to a lot of your other municipal facilities. This is some guidance for that. One area that might be of interest is curb extensions. And one nice thing about curb extensions is you can do these on a trial basis. In fact, I would recommend that if you're going to look at curb bump outs and that sort of thing, you do them on a trial. What curb extensions get you is it pinches up the corners of your intersections a little bit. Your streets tend to be a bit wide. It's interesting, your network doesn't have a lot of hierarchy to it, which actually is good in some ways in a community your size. But what it means is you have a lot of very wide roads. Narrowing up the crossings mean that the pedestrian crossing distance is shorter. It means that pedestrians can get out in front of the parked car to be able to see cars coming. It means the cars can see the pedestrians who are waiting to cross. And it has a bit of a traffic calming effect to slow vehicles down. So we've focused our high priority suggestions for curb extensions in places where there have been some issues with this, and where we heard the most significant problems occur. Again, the suggestion is if you go ahead with these, do them on a trial basis first. If you use materials, the one on the left is from Calgary, where they have these traffic calming blocks that Calgary introduced, and many communities have now started taking them on. The one on the right is from Edmonton, where they just use some wheel stops from parking lots. Once you're done with them in one place, you can pick them up and move them somewhere else. So the intent is that they are reusable and that sort of thing. When you're ready to, you've trialed it, it works, you like it, then you can go spend the money on a full curb extension. But really, there's a lot of benefit to doing the trials. And some of the places trials last for quite some time. So a few of the places we've suggested, I'm not going to go through them all and read out all the detail, but in most cases, you're trying to tighten things up, reduce turning speeds. That's probably one of the biggest ones. You want cars to slow down at those important crosswalks, important pedestrian crossings, so that they're not going around the corners at high speeds. It forces the drivers to slow down a little bit and see where pedestrians are. And again, a lot of this is focused around access points to schools, where you've seen problems before. Same thing on 10th Avenue. We know there have been some pedestrian issues here. And again, these are routes into schools or close to schools, where there's going to be some advantage to, pulling the pedestrians out so they can see, slowing down that traffic, and just making everybody and everything a little bit more visible. So the last area is one that I think is probably a little more aspirational and maybe a little more long-term, but it's, looking towards a primary active transportation network. Too often when communities get into the business of active transportation, they jump in and start just doing things here and there. And it really is quite important to have a bit of a long-term plan. One of the reasons active transportation becomes important, as I mentioned it before, is, it's more than just cycling. You put cycling facilities in, but they can be used by mobility scooters. They pull the bikes off sidewalks, which I've seen a lot of in Edson. They separate bikes from traffic. So oftentimes when you're doing something for bikes, you're actually doing it to help the other modes as well. And creating a little bit of separation also creates a traffic calming effect for those pedestrians who are crossing streets and that sort of thing. So as you look forward, part of what we were trying to do was give you a bit of a network. So when the day comes that you are looking at investing in some active transportation facilities, you've got a network that you can start building to, so you know where things are going. Spot improvements often are are more problematic than helpful, because you've got bike lanes to just end in the middle of a busy street or that sort of thing. Knowing where you're going is helpful. And so we've gone through in the report, we've got number of suggestions. Almost all of them are, we suggest using adaptable materials, much like the curb extension, something you can try. If it doesn't work, you can take it out and not go forward with it. Or if it does work, you can go put something permanent in and take those adaptable materials and move on to the next spot and do things temporary. And this is how a lot of communities now are starting to introduce active transportation. This particular network takes advantage of the crossings of 4th Avenue, really tries to connect those points up so there's safe connections across, and makes use of 3rd Avenue and 7th Avenue as the big east-west streets in the network. And finally, funding. And I should point out that, as you all know, funding changes fairly rapidly. So, this funding discussion is a snapshot in time. But I think one of the advantages you have that everything that's in this report, that should you want to go forward, are the areas where a lot of funding programs are focusing on. The Green Municipal Fund, for example, which comes from the Canadian Federation of Municipalities, as funding programs enable switch to less polluting forms of transportation. So transit, walking, bikes, all fit into that. STRIP, the Strategic Transportation Infrastructure Fund from the province, transit and active transportation projects are well thought of in those as well. Healthy Aging Alberta, ESTS is already applying for funds from that source, and again, it fits with their mandate, their current mandate as a seniors transportation service. And then the Rural Transit Solution Fund is the funding for this study, and the feds have already indicated that we're going to see more of that type of funding. So there's probably the focus these days of a lot of the funding programs are in the active transportation and transit areas. So there are opportunities in the future, and as I said, a big part of what this report is hoping to do is give you some support for funding applications as you move forward, and being able to move forward with some things that maybe you wouldn't have been able to in the past. And with that, I'll leave it open for questions and discussion.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Very in-depth. Council, you have any questions for our presenter this evening? No? All right. Well, thank you very much for the information. Obviously, this is something that we talked about. I really appreciate the information on sidewalks. I often talk about our sidewalks to nowhere that randomly appear and then disappear. So certainly something that I would like us to be focused on moving forward. So with that, I will call the question. All those in favor, please vote now. Thank you, and that motion is carried unanimously. Thank you very much for your work. We have no information items, no sundry items, council committee reports, and we are going to go back to September the 6th, and we will start with Councillor Pasichny.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I attended the Yellowwood County Edson Steering Committee meeting on the 7th of September. And then we had our strategic planning on the 8th, 9th, and 10th. And then I attended our Youth Council Selection Committee meeting this evening. That is my report.
Thank you, Councillor Pasichny. Councillor Byer.
Thanks. On September 7th, I also attended the Multiplex Steering Committee meeting. On September 8th, 9th, and 10th, the strategic planning session. September 14th, I had a Community Futures West Yellowhead board meeting. It was very long. We had a few changes just on the committee itself. Councillor Dwayne Ditto from Brown Cash resigned his position on the board. And Councillor Winston Delorme took his place. And also, Brian LaBerge also resigned his position from the board to, his position on council so he could run for mayor. So we are short a Hinton councillor rep, and we'll wait till after their election, I think middle of November for that. The triple RF loan update. So originally, all those loans the businesses got were going to be due December 31st, and that was going to be doomsday. And after our meeting, we found out that the government announced later that they are going to extend that. So there's information all out about that. So that's good news, because there were a lot of businesses that were not in a position to pay for that. So. Let's see what else there was that is important. Nancy is leading the way with a program through Community Futures West Yellowhead that she's going to be working on a disaster recovery program, tools for businesses, heading it for all of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, because apparently nobody has anything anywhere for that. So she's going to be working on that. And yeah, I think that's the West Yellowhead Community Futures meeting. And then today I also, as Tanya mentioned, the town had the Indigenous blanket ceremony, which I also attended that as well. So I was very, very pleased to see it and be able to participate, and definitely proud of all the staff that attended and went through that. It's a very emotionally exhausting thing to do. So yeah, it was great. And that's my report.
Thank you, Councillor Byer. Councillor Bevan.
Weekend of September 9th, I attended the strategic planning session. On the 14th, we had the Yellowhead Synergy Group. We had some new people in attendance there. Just a little history on the Synergy. Was established in 1998 as the Edson Synergy Group. It increased and everything else. And then 2003, it was changed again to Yellowhead Area Synergy Group. Membership consists of current funded companies, community and corporate representatives, Trapper Association, local residents, Chamber of Commerce, government representative, Town of Edson, Town of Hinton, Yellowhead County, independent representative, AER, AB Economic Development, and Athabasca Watershed. We had a very good meeting there. I did send everything out to you guys on your email. And it was, West Central Airshed was supposed to have the AGM, but they didn't have it. So they ended up doing a presentation to us on renewable energy and landowner consideration. Utilities of policy specialists of farmers of property rights advocate, and orphan wells. That was a long presentation. There was a lot of questions asked about that, and to get a better, an orphan well is just not become an orphan well. It's really, you really have to dig into it and stuff like that. We had a presentation from Cascade Power Project, and Trans Mountain is 98 to 99% done here. And that they're still gonna come next meeting just to give us an update on it. But it's looking good for them, so they'll be moving another town here fairly quickly. And that's my report.
Thank you, Councillor Bevan. And we will go to Councillor Chouinard.
Am I on? Okay, September 6th was my Chamber of Commerce meeting. Temporary councillor or president is Darlene Chouinard. She will take over as president until their AGM in March. Important dates to remember: the small business awards will be changed this year. Details for nominations close September 25th. What's going to happen now for the Small Business Awards? It will not be Facebook voting. It will be a selected group, going back to the old way of doing it. October 20th at the Galloway Station Museum, starting at 6 p.m. will be like a wine and cheese for the awards. Light Up will be November 16th. Night Owl is December 14th. Santa Claus Parade will be December 1st. And December 8th is their Christmas party at the Legion. Tickets will be going on sale briefly. They brought us updates where Kathy has attended chamber meetings. Part of the problem the chambers are all having is their amount of membership they're required to have. A lot of the old bylaws are anywhere up to 15 members. So actually they have 6. So the Alberta Chamber of Commerce stated that they're going to change it to 6 because you just can't get volunteers. My next one, strategic planning from 8th till 10th. I attended that. On September 15th was the Trans-Canada Highway Association. They were bringing us updates on our Aboriginal involvement with tourism is very successful. The other thing is we are working towards, and probably as soon as October, but as late as November, the Trans-Canada Highway Association, we are setting up a meeting with the Transportation Minister, and sometime we hope before to the end of the year, we're going to meet with all 4 transportation ministers from all the provinces. We are still trying to get the City of Edmonton and Lloydminster and other big members on, but it was very positive that the Trans-Canada Highway Association and the involvement with ministers, where transportation ministers, where we are working with them, because when Minister Edson came and did a presentation on the economical stuff, we are working towards partnering with them for all 4 provinces to make this happen. So our involvement with the Trans-Canada Highway and the ministers is very great, and looking forward that we can do positive stuff with them. And that's it for my report.
Thank you, Councillor Chenard, and we will go to Councillor Taylor. Go ahead.
Yeah, on September 9th, I attended the council strategic planning session and workshop, and with the mayor's, although I didn't attend a library meeting, just a quick update on library initiatives. The temporary location on 4th Ave is now up and running. One huge thanks to the library staff for getting that set up, as well as the board has hired an interim library director, Connie Hargraves, will be joining us for the next, sort of hopefully around the next year, to assist with being in the temporary location and then moving us back into the final, the completed renovation expansion library sometime in the spring, and hopefully assist us with hiring a permanent library director. So if you're in and around the library, see the temporary location, thank the staff, and welcome Connie to the team. And that's my report.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. And for me, on September 6th, I attended a Zoom call with Public Safety Canada regarding the policing contract. Municipalities attended that to discuss our concerns with increased costs and lack of consultation and information on what is being negotiated. September 7th, the YCE meeting, the STRAP planning on September 8th through 10th. And then earlier this evening, Councillor Pasichny and I met with Ms. Insko to do our selections for the upcoming Youth Council meeting. We had a lot of great applicants. Unfortunately, not all of them can be on Youth Council, so those that are successful will be contacted here soon for our next Youth Council, which will be meeting for the first time in October. And that is my report. We have no financial items, questions for media and public regarding items from this council meeting. Welcome, Ms. Sobin.
Thank you. Through the mayor.
Could you just turn on the microphone there, please? Thanks.
Through the mayor. With regarding the pivotal development, on the attachment to the context map, the yellow dotted line on there shows that it's an alternate temporary emergency route. I thought, so where's the permanent emergency route going to be, or what was the?
I'll hand that over to CO Beverage.
I'm not sure what's being asked, to be fair.
Okay.
So I understood that there was supposed to be a permanent emergency route, and on here we're just showing temporary emergency route.
So yes, there is, they're planning for a temporary one for now. And then I believe the idea is there would be a permanent one in place.
Is it going to be in the same place, or?
I can't speak to that at this point in time.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? All right. With that, we will take a motion to move into closed session. Councillor Chouinard.
I move we move into a closed session.
Thank you, Councillor Chouinard. All those in favor? All right, are we gonna vote manually? All those in favor? Motion carried. All right, thank you, everyone. So first of all, we have a motion coming out of camera that I think will pop up on the screen here. And I believe Councillor Taylor would like to make this motion. Go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
The council appoint, sorry, I'll wait.
Yeah.
Yeah. The council appoint Bradley Milton, Fire Chief, as interim director of emergency management. There you go. Yep.
All right, thank you, Councillor Taylor, for that very succinct motion.
We can edit that, right? Okay, good.
Any questions, comments, or concerns? What was that first part? Seeing none, I will call the question. Please vote now. We will vote by hand. All those in favor, please vote now. Technology.
It's a hybrid model.
Yes. And we have a secondary motion, Amanda, that we direct administration to move forward with sponsorship proposals. And Councillor Chouinard, I believe, is going to move that.
Like he said, I agree.
Yeah. The council direct administration to move forward with sponsorship proposals.
I've got a electric board
It'll come up on the screen. All right, so the motion is council direct administration move forward with sponsorship proposals. We'll vote by hand. All those in favor? That motion is carried unanimously. And Councillor Chouinard, would you like to make a motion for adjournment? Yes, I will. All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you.